Thank you so much for joining us today on our webinar about Lochs and Castles of Scotland. This is an epic trip that we are very excited to bring you in September of 2024. It is now 11 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. So without further ado, let us get started. As I say, we're going to talk all about this amazing program. So a few words for those of you who are new to Wheel and Anchor. If you have not participated in one of our webinars before or even been on one of our trips, our motto is we bring travelers together, which basically means that the philosophy that we had when we started Wheel and Anchor a few years back, a couple of years before COVID, is that I've been involved in the travel business for well over 30 years. I've brought Canadians to all corners of the world, and what I found is that when you get a bunch of people together who sort of have a like-minded view of the world, as we do as Canadians, and certainly not just Canadians, but let's face it, we are primarily a community that are for people across this great nation. And we kind of have a soft touch. We have intrigue in terms of visiting these places. We have a quest for learning, and we have, most importantly, I think, a respect for local customs and traditions, and just the fact that life is different in many parts of the world. And when you travel with people like that, your experience is so much more rewarding. And of course, as what goes along with that is that you invariably become well traveled, because partly because the pace that we operate our trips on tends to be a little bit slower. We look for the types of programs that we can get a lot, we can spend a little more time, and really sort of, I like to say, stop and smell the roses along the way. And when we do that, we also meet great people. As we deliver this webinar, I'm here in Thailand with 58 of your fellow members. And the experience is just that. We are here for a prolonged period. Everybody's having a great time because we're not in a hurry, and they're getting to know each other. We're getting to know other people that are around us, and really that's what the point of it is, and what makes us a little bit different at Wheel and Anchor. So that's what we're all about. Let me now introduce our team. My name is Gordon Drager, founder of Wheel and Anchor, and curator of all of the interesting programs that we have for you. I'm joined today. Paula is actually here with me in Thailand, co-hosting this trip, and our other esteemed colleague, Barb, based over in Canada, enduring winter like the rest of you, and we won't say anything further about that. But I'd like to say a special hello this morning to Jean Blair from Scotland. Jean, thank you for taking the time to share with our members a little bit about the incredible country of Scotland. Jean, say a few words about yourself. I know you are is it a blue badge guide? You're like one of the best in Scotland.
That's correct. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Yes, I am a qualified blue badge Scottish tourist guide, and I have been qualified for over 20 years. That's hard to believe. The time has zoomed past. It's a good pun. Yeah, I'm qualified to guide all over Scotland, and it's a small country, so the qualification of our blue badge is for the whole country. There are blue badge guides all over the world, and here in the UK there's London blue badge guides and then different regions, right. But here in Scotland you qualify as a Scottish tourist guide. Perfect.
So Jean and James, her partner in crime, so to speak, as another top-notch guide in Scotland, are going to be the people who take us through the country when we go there next year. And she's going to share some of the highlights of what we can expect to see on this amazing trip. Our agenda for today, as usual, it's all about going along on a little digital journey through Scotland and exploring how we are going to approach this country, as I say, in September of 2024. So I am going to be your guide, but actually Jean is going to be your guide today and explain about all the things that we're going to see. So let's look at some beautiful images and share with you some of the details. I'm going to give you, first of all, the high level view of Scotland. And of course, these details are on our program itinerary, which is going to be released simultaneously with this program. So those of you on the webinar tonight are among the first to receive it. And we have a ton of interest for this program, judging by the number of people who signed up for the webinar. But anyway, leaving all that aside, we begin our program in Edinburgh. And for those that are doing just the first part and this very special cruise through the Lochs and through the Caledonian Canal, will be ending as well in Edinburgh, but we have created an extension program as well that takes in a little bit of the Isles, the Isle of Skye and the Western Highlands, and culminating in Glasgow. So first of all, we start in Edinburgh, a pretty easy place to get to from a lot of places in Canada. Toronto specifically, you can obviously fly in direct. We'll spend a few days exploring this rather incredible city. I've been to Edinburgh many times, and it's been some years, but wow, it is truly a magical place. The Royal Palace, the Royal Mile, culminating with Edinburgh Palace, I should say, up on the top of the hill, yeah, the city all underneath. It's all, of course, on the Forth, and we're going to then travel overland up through the Highlands up to Inverness, where we'll spend a night. We'll explore a little bit of that area, and then we're going to embark on this ship I'm going to tell you about. This is obviously the highlight, the exciting part. We're going to spend a week traveling through the different lochs, all the way down out to the Atlantic Ocean, passing by the Hebrides Islands, the Inner Hebrides, and ending up in the Kyle of Lochs, which is adjacent to the Isle of Skye. For those that wish, they can end the journey there by traveling by rail back to Edinburgh, and then as I say, we have this wonderful extension program that takes us for a couple of days up onto Skye to see some of the magnificent landscape of that very famous island before we take the famous West Highland Line rail trip. Some say it's one of the most beautiful in the world. It's going to take us all the way back to Glasgow, a city that a lot of people kind of avoid. Everybody heads to Edinburgh, but Glasgow has a lot to offer. And Jean's going to tell us all about that as we go through the program day by day. So let's get started. First of all, obviously, as I say, we're going to arrive in Edinburgh, and Old Smoky or Old there's a lot of terms in here, Jean, that I can't even pronounce properly. My Gaelic is a little bit. What is it about Edinburgh that is, makes it such a place that just everybody wants to visit in Scotland? It's the starting point for so many travelers.
It has the most wonderful topography. It's built around 7 volcanic hills. Edinburgh Castle sits on the Castle Rock, which is a volcanic plug. There is 2 World Heritage Sites, the Old Town and the New Town. And the distance between the Old Town and the New Town is about 5 minutes walking. But the Old Town is where everybody lived up until the middle of the 18th century. And then the New Town is very Georgian in style. It's a complete contrast, the architecture in both the Old and the New Town. And now, of course, there's lots of modern architecture as well. It's a great walking city. Traffic can be quite congested because there's so many pedestrian streets. So it's much easier to walk in Edinburgh.
For sure, but we're going
to.
Yeah, we're of course going to stay right down in the Old Town, which as you say, that's one of the beauties of Edinburgh is that of course you can pretty much walk to everything that as somebody visiting for a few days will want to see. And so we'll arrive in as usual. We won't plan a lot. We'll get your bearings straight on our typical orientation trip, so you'll have some time, and you'll immediately want to get out. And probably have a first taste of whiskey or something like that. And there's so many great places to do that in Old Edinburgh. But the second day,
it's the capital of Scotland. Sorry to interrupt. The most important bit, it's the capital of Scotland.
Indeed, it is the capital of Scotland, and we'll see the buildings, the spots that make it so notable. Of course, Edinburgh Castle that we see here, the highlight of it all, in the sense of, you know, the most prominent building, obviously, in the city. But a lot of people don't know exactly what is the function of Edinburgh Castle today and originally, and you know, why was it so important? I read somewhere it's the most attacked building in Europe.
It's one of them, that and Stirling Castle, actually. It's you can understand why they built a castle on top of a rock. I mean, the view that you would have for anyone approaching, friend or foe, you would see for miles around. And it was built as a fortification. Originally, there's been a castle on top of the rock since way back prehistoric times, or some kind of fort anyway.
Wow.
The castle that we see today is built over different centuries. And the oldest building in the castle is the oldest in Edinburgh. It's called St. Margaret's Chapel, and it dates back to the 1200s.
Wow. So a 1,000 years and more of history.
Yeah, exactly. And then the rest of the buildings were, there's a royal palace there. Mary Queen of Scots' son was born there. I'm sure many have seen and read about our dear Queen Mary, Mary Queen of Scots. And then the British Army still have offices within the castle itself. So it's always guarded by the soldiers when it's not open to the public. But it's now one of the most visited sites in Scotland.
Yeah, well, I can well imagine. And Edinburgh Castle is obviously often associated with the Royal Mile, and that is basically the road that leads to the castle, but there's more to it than that.
Well, the castle sits at the west end of the Royal Mile, up on the hill, and then the Royal Mile is the street that runs down the hill towards Holyrood Palace, which is it's now the King's official residence here in Scotland. And the royal family stay at Holyrood Palace during the course of the year. And that's also open to the public as well. So the street was the royal route from palace to castle.
From palace to castle.
And vice versa.
And so we'll see all of that, I guess, and a lot more as we wander around Edinburgh. And what's something unexpected that you like to point out to travelers along the way that they might not expect? I mean, you know, everybody goes to Edinburgh and it's like, well, of course, you head for the Royal Mile, you head for Edinburgh Castle. But I recall, and it's been some years since I was last in your fine city there. But what are the unexpected things we might see?
Well, I like to go around by the university, which is very close to the city. That's Edinburgh University, which is the oldest one in the city. And there's some lovely walks around there. There's lots of nice cafes around there as well, eating places. But it's also associated with many medical people over the centuries as well. James Young Simpson, who was the doctor who gave us developed chloroform for ladies to take during childbirth way back in the 19th century, and lots of other interesting medical people. Edinburgh was the centre of the Age of Enlightenment in the 18th century. So names like Adam Smith, the great economist, and Hutton, who was the great geologist. So all these people were living in the city at the one time. So the conversations at the dinner table must have been really interesting.
No doubt, no doubt. But Edinburgh is more to the city itself. As I said, of course, it sits. Is it considered to sit right on the Forth, or the Forth is a little bit further upstream?
It doesn't. We don't have a river as such that runs through Edinburgh. There is a lovely little river called the Water of Leith, and that wonderful walks down, which takes you down. Leith is the harbour, the dock area on the Firth of Forth. And this is a photograph of the Firth of Forth that you've just shown just now. This is the village of Couris, which sits on the Firth of Forth.
exactly. And so the other day that we spend touring around, we're going to see some of these little villages around Edinburgh, which are so charming in their own right, and they offer a bit of a view in, yeah, I guess, to where the commuters live, if you will, for lack of a better explanation.
Well, Edinburgh is such a small city population-wise. It's only just over 500,000 people. So lots of commuting goes on within this, what we call the central belt of Scotland, between Edinburgh and Glasgow. There's only 42 miles from each city to the
Right.
other. So there's lots of commuting. And this particular day that we're heading out of Edinburgh, this is the photographs, the wee village of Couris, which is a restored village. It's from the 16th century, most of the houses. And if anyone has seen Outlander, which is the television series that follows the books of the American author Diana Gabaldon, then Outlander is one of the film locations. And
here
it's popular for visitors or Outlander fans to come and have a look at
it. Yeah, and there's a few other stops that we'll see around the area. I know we're going to head to Stirling itself.
We're going to drive up to Stirling. Stirling has a castle, very similar, sitting on the rock to Edinburgh. And it, in olden days, way back during the Wars of Independence with England, when William Wallace and King Robert the Bruce were around, then whoever occupied Stirling Castle occupied Scotland. They had the power. So it was fought over a lot.
Yeah, indeed. And so, as you say, they have these notorious reputation as being some of the most attacked castles or fortifications in all of Europe. So we're certainly going to take in a lot in those few days that we're there, and we will then travel overland, and the landscape will change quite a bit as we go up into the mountains and make our way up to Inverness. And so this journey, which will take the good part of a day, we've got some nice stops planned along the way, and Dunkeld is one of those plots.
It's a charming wee village in Highland Perthshire. As we drive north, we'll cross over the Forth, and then we'll head towards the city of Perth, where I am, where my hometown, and Jim lives in Perth as well these days.
Yeah, there you go.
Then we'll head northwards to Dunkeld, and it's nestled in the hills there.
So this is where we get our first taste of the Highlands.
Yep, it is. We will cross over the boundary, the Highland boundary fault line, and we'll be in the Highlands. There's a ruined cathedral. It sits on the banks of the River Tay, which is our longest river here in Scotland. It flows out to the east to the North Sea at Dundee, the city on the east coast. And it's a charming old village, as well as some restored houses from way back. And in the photograph here, you're looking at the parish church, and behind it, the ruined cathedral from way back as well.
And I understand, Jean, that you suggested, or Jim suggested to us, that we were going to stop at a sheepdog demonstration there as well, which is, again, an integral part of your heritage there.
It is indeed, and that's a little bit further north. That's going on the road up towards Inverness. Once we'll stop for lunch in Pitlochry, which is a popular little Highland town, and then we'll make our way northwards towards Inverness to the sheepdogs, and it's usually about half an hour outdoors, and this guy trains the sheepdogs, so he puts us through the paces. And if anybody wants a goat shearing a sheep, he often lets us do that as well.
It's certainly part of the fun, and yeah, just to see these dogs in action is really amazing.
It certainly is.
Inverness itself is, as we were talking earlier, is become quite a good sized city. I remember
It
passing through
has.
it first some 30 years ago, and it was sort of seemed like a small town. But you're saying it's the fastest growing town in.
It was the fastest growing city in the UK in the years before COVID, and it's known as the capital of the Highlands. So it has many of the major shops and hospital, and it serves the whole of the Highland area. So anyone who lives on the Isle of Skye, if you're looking to have a medical appointment, then it would be down in the main hospital in Inverness. So it's a hustly, bustly town that sits on the banks of the River Ness. And that, of course, flows out of Loch Ness. It flows northwards out towards the sea at Inverness. Inver is actually the word that means mouth of a river.
There you go. And you said to me about before we embark on the ship the following day, there was one particular, I think, castle that we were going to visit there. Is that right?
Well, this photograph is Inverness Castle. It's a 19th century castle. It's actually not going to be open. It's being completely restored. It's going to be a visitor attraction. But there's a very good museum in the town, and we were proposing to do a small walking tour in the morning, and then for our visitors to go into the museum and do it themselves, and then have some time to wander around before we go on the ship.
Yeah, we go on the ship. So either way, we are going to have a lovely day in Inverness, and then we're going to come across this vessel here, Lord of the Highlands, one of only a couple that ply the waters of Scotland, and she is, as I understand it, the largest vessel that can actually pass through the Caledonian Canal. Like, it squeezes in, basically.
She does. She fits where she touches, which is it's always very interesting sailing down the Caledonian Canal. It's a canal that was opened 200 years ago last year, actually. It's about 60 miles long from Inverness down to Fort William, or vice versa. And there's 29 locks and 10 swing bridges. So we always have quite a crowd of people around us when we're going through the locks, because, as you can imagine, it's the skill of the captain and his crew negotiating these. We sail, the maximum speed is 6 miles an hour, so it's a very leisurely cruise.
Perfect.
And the canal actually sits on a fault line, another fault line. So the canal is actually man-made, and it connects 4 lochs with a locking system.
Yeah.
It's good to get your tongue around all these. A loch, I'm sure many of you know, is the Gaelic word for a lake.
Yeah, exactly. And so, and you know, the lochs, if you've both seen the map of Scotland, like I pointed out at the beginning, very long, narrow, thin bodies of water, fresh water, of course, but connected to via this Caledonian Canal and the loch system out to the Atlantic Ocean. The ship itself, you've sailed on her a few times. I've been dreaming of it for years. I was so thrilled.
Yes.
I was so thrilled that we were able to secure this particular charter in September of 24. Describe the atmosphere on board, because it really beautifully embraces sort of Scottish heritage and design and so on.
It's beautifully designed inside. You can see all the wood paneling here. This is the lounge upstairs on the upper deck. And from this lounge, you actually access out onto the front deck.
And you've got, yeah.
This is the dining room here, and there's various sizes of tables there, but the decor is very tastefully Scottish, but not over the top with tartan, in muted colours as well. There's some nice heathers colours in there. And the atmosphere is, because there's only a maximum of 48, 49 people, then the atmosphere is very homely indeed. The crew are trained to the highest standard, and the food is fantastic on board as well.
Yeah, yeah. But we have full board on board the vessel. We've got breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and also a full range of beverages, all included in the program. So it really is a very luxurious way to travel down this special route through the Lochs and the canal. Of course, the charm of the Scottish staff is not to be underestimated. I think I'm sure these guys are really make the experience so that you really feel like you are at home in Scotland.
It's a 5-star standard, and everything's at our fingertips. If you want to ask anything, then we're all there to make sure that the holiday is as best as possible.
As best as possible. And so there's a few different cabins aboard. We have one suite on board the ship, but also a few nice balcony cabins for those that wish. And then our standard deluxe cabins, not pictured here, but all very comfortably appointed. And as you said before, Jean, wood paneling throughout and lovely design touches without going overboard. Importantly as well, you've got picture windows in all of the cabins. So yeah, it's a very comfortable way to travel this particular route. Let's talk first about the journey itself. We're going to overnight in Inverness the first night, and before heading down to Loch Ness. And I think you're saying we visit Culloden. Is that the correct way of pronouncing that?
Yep. On the morning, the first morning, we visit Culloden battlefield by a coach. So we'll be taken off the ship and then onto Culloden, which is just outside of Inverness. It's a journey of about 20 minutes. And we can visit the visitor centre and have a walk around the battlefield itself. The battle was 1746, and it was the last Jacobite uprising that we had here in Britain. And
from there we begin the journey right away by entering the Loch system. The Loch
right.
system to the Loch and Loch.
This is Urquhart Castle, which is situated on the shores of Loch Ness. And Loch Ness is the largest volume of fresh water that we have in the whole of the UK. It's over 800 feet deep. And of course, Nessie has lots of places to hide. It is beautiful on a lovely day, but if the wind's whipping up here, then it can be a little bit choppy. But it's the scenery is beautiful. It's a long loch, about 24 miles long.
Yeah, and I recall driving along it, and a wonderful scenery, and I think to sail down it even better. But to your point, Jean, Scotland isn't exactly known for fabulous weather all the time.
No,
it can be, how do you say it in Scotland? Dreich.
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 Dreich, which means dismal, miserable. But yeah, I will say that people don't come to Scotland to sunbathe. So layers is always the best at all times of the year. September usually can be a wonderful month of warm sunshine and autumn colours just starting. But the way our weather is going around the world just now, who knows?
Who knows? Who knows indeed. So the Caledonian Canal, as you said at the outset, is basically the system that connects Inverness and all of these lochs. And so this is really a highlight, is actually seeing the engineering works that enable ships to pass up and down the system. Is that right?
It was built for commercial use, and nowadays it mainly is for pleasure. But there's still the odd fishing boat that sails. To sail from the east coast to the west coast of Scotland, you have to go all the way up to the very north, round the Pentland Firth, and back down the other side to the east coast. So this was to help the commercial
shorten the journey. Yeah, exactly. And you know, the scenery, as you can see here, this time of the year in September, we might get some autumn colors as we pass into Loch Lochy. And I guess we have, you know, pretty much every day we're off the ship visiting some of the, you know, villages and towns that we would see along the way. Is that right?
Yes, yeah. The first when the southern end of Loch Ness is Fort Augustus, and we overnight in Fort Augustus. Then there's time to wander about the village itself. The canal cuts the village in two, actually. And then as we sail down, there's not a day that we're not off the ship. We'll maybe be sailing in the mornings, but we'll be off the ship in the afternoons, or vice versa.
Exactly. And so
we can choose to do that.
and so the first couple of days we're you know, basically inland on the canal, and then we emerge then out at the western end and head to Oban, which for whiskey drinkers will be a familiar name. Tell us a little bit about Oban.
This is a wonderful photograph of Oban Bay looking across to the Isle of Mull, actually. So where the houses are closest to the edge of the water here, this is the main street. The distillery is just actually along towards the right. You're looking over to the island where the ships are berthed. This is an island that protects Oban itself. So it's a very sheltered bay. This is Kerrera. And Oban is a ferry port, so it's full of hustle and bustle. The ferries go out to some of the islands on a very regular basis. There's fishing boats, there's some commercial boats, there's seal trips. Yeah, it's a really hustly bustly place. Small, it's only got a population perhaps of about 8,000, but an important place here.
Very important, and particularly important for whiskey drinkers.
Yeah, definitely.
Definitely. Like the famous Oban whiskey. So our journey takes us now northward again, as you say, along the Isle of Mull, and here again the landscape is changing to these sort of drawn long hills that you see here. And so what's special about this part of the country?
Mull is an island with a population of only about 2,500 people. It's a very scattered population. You'll find that throughout the highlands. Once you leave the cities, we're very much a scattered population. In fact, we're a very small populated country of just over 5 million people. So the Isle of Mull is one of my favourite islands. It has a small population. This is Duart Castle that we will sail past before we berth into the port of Craignure. And this is the ancestral home of the Clan MacLean. And at the moment, the present chief, Sir Lachlan MacLean, he is often at the castle. He lives in the castle during the summer months.
Nice. Yeah, well, it looks like a pretty amazing place, and we'll get a chance to visit Duart Castle while we're there.
I believe that that is on the cards for visiting Duart Castle.
Yeah, well, sounds amazing. One of the other stops here we're going to make is this place called Egg, and this is really other than if you go on a cruise on this particular itinerary, you're unlikely to get to Egg, this little island. What makes it so special? And I guess its
This is
remoteness is one thing.
yeah, remoteness. This is actually a view from Egg. This is the Isle of Rum that we're looking at here. So there is called the Small Isles. There's Rum, Egg, Muck, and Canna. So when we sail from Tobermory on Mull, we'll sail round the Ardnamurchan Peninsula, which is very remote, and then we will pass these islands that I've just mentioned. And Eck has a population of about 80. It is community owned and they're self-sufficient. So there's a small distillery or a brewery. I think it might be a brewery on Egg. There's so many of these nowadays that people are starting. It's like difficult to catch them all. And there's a small community centre there. And the ferry, Calmac Ferry, or the Calmac is the company that operates all our ferries on the west coast. And there is a daily service to Eck.
Right, but that's the only way to get there, and that's part of what makes it so attractive, because you are, you're really exploring some of these remote places, and this is the real Scotland. I mean, Scotland is all the real Scotland, but what I find is, when you get into these Western Islands, it's amazing, and to hear my recollection is the accents, at least for our ears. From Canada, the accents of the local people is wow. That's what is the charm of Scotland.
and of course the islands have many Gaelic speakers as well. We speak
right.
Gaelic. It's 60,000 people speak Gaelic. So there is an opportunity to hear Gaelic or being sung as well. And of course, out on the west coast, we also have in the waters lots of sea mammals. There's dolphins, there's minke whales, there's a couple of orcas kicking about as well. So it's a wonderful opportunity to see. You see the perspective of the land in a completely different way from the water.
From the water, for sure. And so our ship then will sail into the Kyle of Lochs before we spend one final night in our farewell dinner and a sort of a grand celebration there. And but Eileen Donan Castle has to be one of the most famous in Scotland.
Yep, it's on every calendar and every shortbread tin. So many visitors can recognize it. And it sits right at the entrance from Lochs and Loch Duich, sorry. So it was built to guard the area here. And as you can see, there's a small bridge that you walk across to get onto the tiny wee island that the castle is built upon. The castle looks ancient, but it was actually all rebuilt, restored in the early 1920s and 30s.
Yeah, which is great because it is such a remarkable structure with an even more remarkable landscape.
And if anyone has any McCrae blood in their ancestry, then this is a McCrae castle.
That's a McCrae castle. So, and of course, this is part of the story. The heritage of Scotland is the various clans that comprised it, and then went out to the whole world. And a lot of us in Canada are descended from one of these clans, and so I find it always interesting because those with direct descendancy and Scottish blood are always interested to pursue a little bit their heritage and where they hail
It's
from.
wonderful to walk in your ancestors' footsteps.
Yes, most definitely. We will disembark in Lochs, and for those who are ending the trip here, it's a lovely journey back along the route, more or less, that we came by ship. We're going to take by rail, heading over to Inverness and then back down, and you get to see the countryside again, but this time from the rails. An amazing journey. and that will culminate with an overnight in Edinburgh before flying back home. But we felt that there might be a little bit more to our Scotland adventure, and so we created a bit of an extension program here because so many people have asked about the Isle of Skye. It's so famous, and I'm not even sure why it's so famous, but what is it about the Isle of Skye where we'll spend a couple of nights that makes it so appealing to visitors?
It attracts visitors because of its rock formations and mountains. This photograph, the rocks in front of us, this is called the All Man of Storr, and it's a rock pinnacle. And you can walk from the road, you can walk up to the Old Man of Storr. It's a pretty tough walk, but it is accessible. And you're looking out to the mountains on the mainland, actually, here. Skye, the mountains are either black gabbro, the type of rock, or they're red granite. And they're very different geologically, those different types of mountains. So some are very rugged, some are conical. It can be called the Misty Isle because often the mountains are shrouded in cloud. That's the Vikings called Skye the Misty Isle.
Yeah. And regardless of what the weather's like, the scenery is just magical. And so we'll probably stay up in the principal village or town called Portree.
Yeah, that's right. Skye has a population of about 5,000, but in the summer months, then the population doubles with the amount of visitors.
I can imagine.
But it's full of peninsulas, it's very rugged, and we'll visit the north end of the island, Dunvegan Castle, which is the ancestral home of the MacLeods, and in the south of the island are the MacDonalds, and there's a few McQueens thrown in there as well. So yeah,
likely somebody, everybody's got a little bit of something from this part of Scotland.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so when we leave Skye again, the culmination of this trip, and I'm a train lover, I admit it. I think these rail journey is something that is an incredible way to see a country. So it took a bit of persuading from me, but we coordinated it such that when we head back south, we're going to first of all take a bus and then a little ferry ride off of Skye to Mallaig, and then we embark on the West Highland train. Maybe you can say a few words about it. All I know is I've seen it from the road, and this famous viaduct that you see in front of us. We aren't taking the steam train that you see here. That's just goes at certain times of the day. But the scenery along the West Highland line is amongst the best of any rail journey in the world, is what I understand.
That's right. It's called the Road to the Isles, and this is the Glenfinnan Viaduct. And the rail track itself was completed in the early 1900s, and all the bridges and viaducts are actually made of concrete for the very first time. The project it was built by an engineer called Robert McAlpine, and Concrete Bob was his nickname because he insisted that all the bridges be built with this new material. And it has become extremely famous since the days of Harry Potter, because the viaduct was part of the film location for the Harry Potter films, particularly the first two.
There you go. And Harry Potter or not, it's absolutely magical, and it's an incredible journey to make. And we'll spend the better part of the day traveling all the way from Mallaig, just off the Isle of Skye, all the way down to Glasgow. And we'll spend the last couple of nights in Glasgow. And I wanted to do this as well because it gets a bit of a bad rap. And it's actually quite a beautiful city. Everybody's attention in Scotland is focused on Edinburgh. Why is Glasgow you know, the black sheep between the two. So from a traveler's perspective.
Well, it was always a heavy industrial city.
Right.
So that was where they made the shipbuilding, the locomotives, the steelworks. So it was always seen as, you know, not a place for people to visit because it wasn't that interesting. And Edinburgh has that wonderful topography. Well, Glasgow, this is Glasgow Cathedral that we're actually looking. And this is a very ancient cathedral. It's still a practicing church. And the patron saint of Glasgow, St. Mungo, is actually buried in the cathedral way down in the crypt. It has the most wonderful 19th century architecture. Glasgow was the second city of the British Empire. So there was a lot of trading went on. There was tobacco, cotton, long before the ship building. So many men in particular made a huge amount of money, and they built these amazing museums and art galleries, and they're still there today for us to visit. And the
Exactly.
museums and art galleries in Scotland are all free, apart from if there's a special exhibition. So we're so lucky we can just wander in and have a look at some fantastic paintings.
Yeah, brilliant. And so, you know, Glasgow will certainly get a great taste of the city from yourself, from Jim. But it might be the type of place that our members actually want to spend a couple extra days, because there is so much to see. Yeah, it's worth it.
It's a great place for shopping nowadays. There's 3 pedestrianised shopping streets. There's a wonderful music scene in Glasgow now. There are so many different music venues. Celtic Connections actually is starting this week, which is a winter festival celebrating all Celtic music from different parts of the world as well. So there's always something going, and great food, great restaurants in Glasgow.
Yeah. A must see. And from Glasgow, we will bid farewell to Scotland on a trip that I think really captures so much in so many different ways. We're traveling by coach, by road, by rail, by boat, of course. This is really I think the ultimate trip to see the country. So I'll just touch on a few of the details. Of course, all of it's in the program itinerary. You're going to get a copy of that emailed to you together with the link for the replay of this webinar. But just to give you a slight overview of what we're looking at, we've got 3 different categories. Mind you, there's only 1 suite aboard this ship, and a handful of balcony cabins, and the majority of the accommodation is in deluxe cabins. So the program is that we have the base program that culminates at the Kyle of Lochs, that you can add on all those extra nights and the train journey down to Glasgow here. And of course, as with any of our programs, although we are chartering the whole vessel, we are splitting the groups into 2 so that we have a more intimate experience with Jim and Jean as our guides throughout the trip. And we have, of course, all of our accommodation on board. The base program is already 12 nights, 7 on the ship and 5 on land, of course, and all your meals and all of your beverages on board the ship included, lunches and dinners otherwise, and of course hosted by one of our Wheel and Anchor hosts. So a lovely program. Airfare and insurance being the only things that you need to arrange separately, but typically, and I think these rates are actually a little bit on the high side, although you never know what airfare these days is like the climate. You never know what it's going to be. But nevertheless, just for those contemplating the trip, this is what you can consider. And that pretty much wraps up the details. I see, Barb, a few questions have come in, so let's address those before we wrap up today.
Yeah, we do have a few questions. There is a question about weather, which Jean did talk about. I don't know if you want to give a rough idea of actual temperature range, or if there's a difference between, like, how much difference between the lowlands and the highlands?
No, it's generally all the same. There's a misconception that the Highlands are cooler, but that would be in September. That doesn't really matter quite so much. It is cooler in the winter months. But no, overall, I would say always our advice is layer. Always bring sensible walking shoes, plenty of layers, and a decent waterproof, not just a shower jacket.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
That helps.
The other question is about, is there Scottish food, traditional Scottish food, dance culture, that side of it, like on the cruise part?
Yeah, as far as I'm aware, there will be some Scottish dishes on the menu, and we have a gala night where I'm quite sure we'll have some haggis to taste.
Okay.
For sure. And as far as the Scottish dance, the Celtic dancing, and so on and so forth, we will endeavor to find out what exactly is going on while we're in Edinburgh, while we're in Inverness. There's always opportunities, and so the question, the wish is certainly noted, and it's definitely something we want to facilitate for our members. So we'll make sure that the ability to take in some of that culture is integral to the program.
Okay, great. And then somebody's asking how rough the seas are, particularly sailing in towards Egg.
That's not a question I can really answer. It
Depends.
You never
really
know.
depends. You just never know. But
you never know.
The captain always does the very best for us. There's always seasick tablets on board, and we're there to help. And he wouldn't take us into any rough waters that wasn't necessary.
Yeah, and you're somewhat protected in there because it's not like you're out in the open Atlantic Ocean. But then again, even in Loch Ness, if you get a bit of a stiff wind passing through, it can whip up some chop. And so this is definitely a trip where unlike some of our other voyages, that you can get some rough water. It's not a big vessel. 19 cabins aboard this, so we always say, if you are somebody that suffers from motion sickness, then there are ways that you can mitigate that so that you can still enjoy the program.
Exactly. I wouldn't think it would be something to be overly worried about. It's not as if we're going up to Alaska or the Antarctica, something like that.
Okay, there is another question. Is Glasgow Cathedral a Church of Scotland church?
It is.
Okay. I think is there much opportunity for hiking?
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead, Jean.
Well, not so much hiking up mountains, but we've got several walks that we've built into the program. And then perhaps in Oban, there's some nice walks that you can do up to the top of the hill. Yes, so there is an opportunity, but not to climb Ben Nevis.
Yeah, so serious hiking, exactly. Like for Ben Nevis, I mean, if there's, and I know that we do have more and more active members in the group who are interested in something like that. If you're interested in that kind of thing, then my recommendation might be to do the first part of the trip ending in Kyle of Lochs, and then from there you're relatively close to Fort William, which is the gateway to Ben Nevis, the highest mountain in the UK, and you can go on some pretty serious hikes in various parts of the Highlands. So not part of our program directly, but definitely something that's accessible. And if you're interested in that, I might just join you, because I would love to do some of the hikes in the Scottish Highlands. Spectacular countryside for sure.
Okay, there is a question about like entry into the castles. So how many of the castles can you actually enter, and is the entry included in the tour?
Yes, we would have a visit inside Eilean Castle. And as far as I'm aware, that is included.
Yes, it is included. Yeah.
Okay. There's another question about assistance with luggage on the extension. They're saying it seems like there's a lot of changes in the ferries and trains, etc. Is there any assistance with people's luggage, or they're needing to be able to not overpack and carry their own?
So as with any of our trips, I mean, we don't, there isn't the ability to have porters at sort of every single stop along the way, but you do have to have the ability to bring your own luggage, for example, from a coach into the railway station. And we will make, I think, Jean, if I'm not mistaken, there is a special facility for baggage on the West Highland line. Is that not correct?
There is luggage space
Yes.
on the train, or there's a possibility that you could actually try and arrange the luggage van, but that's something that would be looked into.
Yeah, exactly. So to the extent that we can make, that we can make it more convenient to take luggage, then we will certainly do that.
And also on the ferry coming from the Isle of Skye back to the mainland, then the coach comes on the ferry as well. So we don't take luggage off. That's correct.
That's correct. And I see a question here about capacity on the ship. There are a couple of ships in this fleet. And so this particular one, the one that we have, the Lord of the Highlands, is 19 cabins, but actually a couple of those cabins one of those cabins is occupied by one of our guides. So we actually have a maximum capacity of 17 cabins that are available for this program, which means we would not have more than 34 guests on this trip. And we would divide that into two so that you'd have you'd have basically two groups of no more than 17. Of course, that depends on how many solo travelers book, because of course, if one person occupies a cabin, that's one less person on the ship. So we expect a group size here of between 30 and 34 members joining us for this trip. Okay.
Yeah, that seems to be the questions. Maybe there's one more.
Yeah.
How smooth is the ferry crossing to the Isle of Skye? Is the question.
Yeah, so I think we addressed that before. It's a fairly short ferry between the Isle of Skye and Mallaig. It's only about 40 minutes, is it?
35 minutes.
Yeah, 35, 40 minutes. It's not long. It's not something to worry about. It's relatively smooth. Good. Well, all of the other details, or many other details, are available in our program itinerary. We're going to get that right out to you. And so I appreciate that if you do have more questions, please do drop us a note. Paula or Barb will be happy to answer your questions. And we appreciate the emails. And most of all, these days, we are extremely busy with inquiries for all of our trips. So we will get back to you as soon as we reasonably can. I will just add as a final note before we sign off, this program has been asked for quite a long time, or well, not specifically this program, because I think a lot of people weren't expecting that we were actually going to cruise through Scotland, but we were able to accomplish that. It will likely fill up very, very quickly, because we have one sailing, that's it. So if you're interested, drop us a note soon. We will take our members on a first come, first serve basis. And I want to extend a thanks to Jean for your time, your insights on giving us a little flavor of what we can expect. We're really excited to come to Scotland.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it as well. And I'm hoping that I'll see lots of you next September.
I'm sure you will. We had a lot of people on the webinar this evening, and so I'm sure many of them will be coming along with us on our trip. So thank you for joining us. Our webinar next week will be on Costa Rica, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And so that's where a bunch of our members are traveling right now through the wilds, the jungles of and the rainforests of Costa Rica. You can find out all about that with our host Martine next week on Thursday. Do join us for that. Thanks a lot for joining us, and look forward to sending you all of the information and getting you all booked up on this trip. Take care. We'll see you next week.
Take care, everyone. Thanks very much.